welcome. I hope there are folks out there listening to us. Welcome to this Q&A about the Gender History Master's programs at the University of Glasgow. My name is Sam Rutherford. I'm the convener of the two programs, which I'll say a bit about in a minute. And I'm here in my office at the Glasgow University campus, and I'm joined by a colleague and two students who are currently enrolled on the master's program, so they'll introduce themselves.
Thank you, Sam. Welcome, and I'm Sarah Cockram. I am the convener of two core courses on the master's programs in gender history, one that takes place in semester 1 and one in semester 2, and I'm looking forward to telling you some more about those later on.
Hi everyone, I'm Anna. I'm a student on the MSc in Gender History. I've been doing it full-time and in person for the year.
Hi, I'm Emily and I am exactly the same as Anna. I do the MSc in Gender History full-time and in person as well.
Great. So maybe just to start off, and do start posting questions in the chat anytime. If you have questions that you're already burning to answer, do start posting them. We'll talk for a little bit first, and then we'll get into answering your questions, but do shout out questions anytime. So just to sort of say a bit about the two programs. Now there are two programs, but in many ways they're really one program. So we have something called the MSc in Gender History, which is our in-person program where you study here at the University of Glasgow campus. And then we have the MSc in Global Gender History by Distance Learning, and that's our distance learning program where you study online wherever you are. But most of what we do integrates the two programs in a hybrid setting. And so the semester 1 core course, Gender, Politics, and Power, is a hybrid course where regardless of whether you're enrolled online or in person, you'll sort of study together through Zoom. And most of our optional courses as well are offered hybrid. And so any students who are studying online are essentially present there through Zoom in the room with our in-person students. So we'll be talking about the two programs together, but sort of in a technical sense, you would enroll on a different pathway depending on whether you were interested in studying by distance learning or studying in person. And then the way that those programs are both structured is that there is a core course in each semester. In semester 1, as I said, there's a hybrid core course called Gender, Politics, and Power. And then in semester 2, there's a separate core course, depending on whether you're studying online or in person. On the in-person program, there's a core course called Gender, Culture, Text, which is mostly focused on studying primary sources and getting used to working with primary sources in history. And as Sarah mentioned, she convenes that course. And then there's a different core course for the online program, which is called Gender History Applied. And that's more focused on sort of how gender history appears in history and heritage settings outside universities, like museums and film and television and settings like that. But that's an online course, it's delivered fully online, but you're very welcome to enroll in it if you're enrolled on the in-person program as well. And then alongside those two core courses in both semester 1 and semester 2, you'll take some optional courses where you can choose from a wide range of optional courses, both within and beyond gender history that we have offered here in the history subject area. And then in the summer following those 2 semesters of coursework, you write a dissertation. And that's on a topic of your own choosing. It's a 15,000-word dissertation. It's a really exciting opportunity to explore something that you're interested in and do your own primary source research and make an original argument that makes sense of the research that you've found. And that's exactly the stage that our current students are in now. Sarah, is there anything that you wanted to add about the structure of the program?
No, just how it has a lot of flexibility built in and a lot of support from a really wide range of expertise in our colleagues, which makes it, I hope, very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, Sarah's a medieval historian. I'm a historian mostly of 20th century Britain, but my official job title is lecturer in LGBTQ+ history. So that's most of what I teach on the Gender History Master's program and more widely in the subject. But we have colleagues covering all parts of the world, all time periods. There's a really wide range of expertise so that you can focus on the times and places that you are interested in. Anna and Emily, do you want to maybe say a bit about, I would love if you would be willing to talk about your dissertations, but maybe anything else that you have to say about kind of how you've found this year so far.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first if that's okay with you, Emily. So we're both currently in the process of preparing for and beginning to write our dissertations, which I suppose the process really began for us in May. We've been going to different archives that are like relevant to us, reading basically everything in preparation for our dissertations. My dissertation is focused on the impact of Section 28 on the teaching of gay issues in the schools, specifically about sex education, and how far the kind of legislation did, if it did have any impact at all. So I've been primarily based with my archival research in London. It's been a really great experience, not only to like just see a bit more of England, but also just to do some like real history and get your hands dirty and like see some things and feel like you're actually doing some like first-hand historical work, which is nice. I think I can't speak for Emily, but I think we've both had a great experience on the course so far. I think the great thing about the course is that it gives you a lot of options. So within the two core courses that we do, gender politics and power and gender culture and text, each week is kind of based on a different thing. So you get a great exposure to a lot of different like histories that I might not be particularly like interested in or do a lot of work in, but that you go to the week and it's so interesting and you see so much more history than you've been exposed to before. And I've done courses outside of those, outside of gender history. I've done kind of the ones more tailored to modern history, and so it's really great to be able to just pick what you want to do out of all the like great variety of options that there are.
I completely agree with you in that I think we've both had really positive experiences from it, and I think, as you said, with like the core courses, particularly, I think gender politics and power was the one I enjoyed the most. But certainly, I came into the program being mostly interested in socialist history and Soviet history, and now I've come out the other side with kind of a massive scope of interests, and my current dissertation is looking at anti-nuclear activism in the north of England in like very contemporary, so sort of 1990s. But it is also in lots of ways an international history, a history of deindustrialization and of kind of socialist and Soviet issues. And I think I would never be in the position I was without kind of the breadth and depth of the program so far. And also I think there's loads of choice in terms of the optional modules. Because I did a medieval option, I did some socialist history, some Scottish history, and reproductive rights, which was very much like a global, like 2 centuries worth of content. And so I'd say that there is definitely something for everyone within the program.
Yeah, Emily, it was helpful that you listed out those options because folks might come away with the unrepresentative impression that we all do late 20th century British history, which is not the case, even if it is the case that that is the field in which you both are writing very exciting dissertations. Anna, do you want to say a bit about the options that you did as well?
So trying to remember back, in my first semester I did Sam's module, which is called Approaches to Queer and Trans History. So it's kind of formatted that half of it is kind of theory based and half of it is kind of then looking at more like historical issues in queer and trans histories, as per the title suggests. But I think that course is really great because I did a joint honours degree, so I did history and sociology at my undergrad, and so then having the theory and the kind of history really like lent itself to the things that I'd done before. And within the course we had people that had never done history before, you know, it was their first insight, and their ability to kind of join in and pick up just speaks to like how well these courses are formatted, you know, not only for historians but for anyone within the university community. And that is the great thing, you get to meet so many people through doing these courses because everyone has access to them. I'm trying to remember what other one I did in my first semester.
You probably did the doing history.
Oh yes, so that's a core course that everyone on history does, which is also a great opportunity to then kind of branch out from the gender history realm and meet everyone. In my second semester, I did reproductive rights, which is what Emily was talking about, which is a great course. It's really interesting, covers such a variety of topics where I kind of used that to link to my other optional module that I was doing, which was called An Form of Slavery, which is about indentureship in the post-emancipation era. And that's a modern history course rather than a gender history course. But I wrote my reproductive rights essay about the kind of reproductive capacities of enslaved women. And so I kind of used that second semester to create like a timeline in itself, which I think is really good because there's so many options of modules that you can kind of either do a bit of everything or weave everything into one, which I chose to do.
Yeah, just picking up on a couple things there that you mentioned. I mean, one is we should say doing history is the core course for students on all of the different history master's strands, and there's quite a number of different history master's strands. So there's a bit of interplay where gender history has some integration with some of the other history master's strands, but it also kind of has its own unique identity and its own. I mean, I'm the convener of gender history that's sort of separate, kind of within, I'm repeating myself, but there's sort of, you have your own cohort, your own program convener, your own core courses. And so there's a bit more of a kind of tailored specific experience for gender history, but you also have opportunities to interact with the broader history master's program in your optional courses and in the Doing History core course and in events and activities kind of outside your formal classroom time. And then another thing, to pick up on another thing, great, I'm excited that there are questions coming in, which we will get to. Another thing to pick up on from what Anna said that I wanted to flag was that both students who are enrolled on the gender history master's programs will often have had a first degree from outside history. I would say, statistically, probably most of our students have a first degree from history, but by no means all. And lots of students come from social sciences backgrounds, from other humanities backgrounds. And, I think it's important to emphasize that this is a history degree. Like, we're teaching you the methods of history. We're preparing you to write a dissertation that uses primary sources and analyzes them in the way that a historian would. But we don't expect that you'll already know how to do that coming in. We won't expect that you'll have written an undergraduate dissertation in history. Many of our students haven't written an undergraduate dissertation at all. So we are prepared to sort of meet you where you are and where you're coming from. And as long as you're kind of ready and excited to take on a postgraduate degree in history and kind of enter into the experience of becoming a historian. And then as well, like, I know my experience of teaching my optional course this year was that we had students enrolled in the course as well who were enrolled in other master's programs in the university, out with history. So there was a student in my course who was enrolled in the theater studies master's. I think there were one or two other people in sort of other non-history programs. So this can also, gender history, while it's history, it can also be quite an interdisciplinary space where people are coming from different backgrounds and engaging kind of from different disciplinary perspectives with some of the theoretical and methodological content that we do in the program. I'm picking up on Elizabeth's question in the chat, who asked, is the dissertation for MSc different from a DPhil 1 would be? Or I assume, you might mean a PhD or a doctoral thesis. Yes, an MSc dissertation is shorter. Because an MSc is a 12-month program. And so an MSc dissertation is 15,000 words in our program. And that's something that you would start probably thinking about towards the end of the first semester, and then developing your topic over the course of the second semester. And the dissertation proposal is due at the end of semester 2. And then you'll meet with a supervisor and begin working on it over the summer, and then it's due in September. So you you do the whole cycle of the year, and the dissertation is essentially the third term of study, which happens over the summer. So that's a kind of bounded period of time. And so it's as compared to a PhD, which might take 4 years, this is a much shorter project, right? And a much more time limited project, and a much more kind of word count limited project. But you would still, ideally be making an original argument grounded in research and primary sources, and that analysis will kind of articulate an intervention into the secondary literature, that is, into what historians kind of know and have thought and have said about the topic. So you'll be doing, kind of graduate level, professional historian level work. and we'll sort of support and prepare you to do that. I see some more questions coming in. Maybe before we get to those, Anna and Emily, do you want to add anything about kind of your experience of the rhythm of the year and when you started thinking about your dissertation, and sort of how you got to the point where you were ready to start writing the dissertation?
I think, well, so we both, I know for me, I started thinking about my dissertation and kind of what I would want to do for a bigger project. We both did PhD applications for the following year, and I think doing that, it provides you kind of a really early start into, you know, what, from my research interest, how is this scalable? Like, where do I go upwards from this? But I suppose I kind of knew from my first semester, well, carrying on from my undergrad, I knew sex education was something I was really interested in. And then I kind of spent some time thinking about it. And as I got into second semester, that's when I started forming like a plan, and then reading more of the literature and kind of seeing where, you know, what is under researched, where is the possibility of making an intervention. I think it is quite a slow process. It can seem really scary because you hear 15,000 words. I think you have to just be guided primarily by your own interests. That's the most important thing when picking something big, is that you actually are going to enjoy doing it, and you need to care about it properly.
I think, yeah, was sort of fairly similar. My two projects are on kind of slightly different topics. So I really very much fell into my dissertation idea in about the end of November, start of December. But then I was sort of busy with the stuff and term got in the way. So I didn't really start thinking about my dissertation properly until February. And I found, for me personally, I kind of like to have one big thing on the go at a time and focus on things in chunks. And so starting in February I'm in a comfortable place now. I'm getting ready to start writing. So I would certainly say, like, you don't have to have an idea, you know, in October, whatever. It is very much not necessary. And it does give you that length of time to really start thinking about it and thinking about what you would like to do. Because, like Anna said, it's a long process and it really needs to be something you enjoy.
Yeah, that's a really helpful perspective. I think also to illustrate kind of different ways of arriving at a topic, right? You know, Anna, it sounds like you kind of reverse engineered your master's dissertation based on a larger project that you knew you wanted to do, right? Whereas Emily had a more kind of contingent set of circumstances that led you to your topic. And we do put on skills workshops over the course of the year that are kind of additional to the coursework, that are really focused, I mean, on a number of different things, but a couple workshops in particular that are focused on supporting you in finding a dissertation topic and workshopping that topic with your peers and with staff, so that you can get some feedback as you proceed towards the proposal stage. So there's quite a lot of kind of thinking and a lot of supported thinking that goes into that prior to the moment when you submit a proposal and start working with a supervisor. Now we've got a lot of questions, which is great, that have come in by email. I will maybe sort of start with some of the easier answers and then scale up. So yes, it is possible to study part-time. You can do the program over 2 years, where you would take, I'd have to check to see exactly what the course structure is. Maybe Sarah, you know off the top of your head, but you would take a smaller number of credits in each semester, and you would complete the program over 2 years. Instead of over 1 year. So it'd be sort of at half the rate that you would if you were studying full time. And people certainly do that. It can be a really good option if you're, you know, balancing the program alongside full-time work or carrying responsibilities. And many people have done that successfully in the past. You know, studying online can also be a way to study more flexibly. If you're enrolled on the online version of the program, you're not necessarily required to participate in everything live in the same way that you would be if you were an in-person student. So there's a bit more flexibility in terms of participating in coursework asynchronously, and sort of studying more flexibly in that way as well. And sorry, was somebody going to add something? There was like an intake of breath. No, do jump in if anyone wants to add anything. And then is there flexibility in module selection across departments? Yes, in each semester, we suggest that we allow you to take one course out with history. So that's partly to sort of maintain the coherence of the gender history program, but then there are lots of related courses in other departments that might be quite relevant to the work that you're doing, and many students do take one course per semester in departments outside of history. And in the past, I mean, there's a department at Glasgow, fun fact, called Economic and Social History, which is completely separate to the history department, but there are often relevant options offered in that subject area. And students in the past have taken courses in modern languages, in anthropology and sociology and law. So there are certainly options there as well. Let's see, what else have we got to answer? Sarah, do you want to take a question?
Yes, so we have a question here. Can students focus their dissertation on non-Western histories of gender, and is there support for this? Yes, there absolutely is, and they absolutely can. There is a lot of expertise in all kinds of non-Western histories at Glasgow. It's a really lively centre for global history, of course. And so, yes, there absolutely is. There's lots of staff support for these kinds of projects. And you'll also find non-Western perspectives woven all the way through the core courses as well. And we have some fantastic expertise at Glasgow.
Yeah, we work especially closely with our colleagues in the Centre for Global History, as Sarah said, and also in the Beniba Centre for Slavery Studies. And many of our colleagues who work in the Beniba Center have specialism in gender history as well, and teaching our core courses, as well as offering their own optional courses. So those are some areas in which we're particularly strong. But, you know, we have students in this year's cohort who are working in East Asian and Southeast Asian history, in the history of the Atlantic world, thinking about who else we have represented in South Asian history as well, and sort of Pacific world history. So lots of options there. And we work to find you the right supervisory expertise for what you want to do as well in your dissertation. Yeah, Sarah, sorry.
Yeah. I was just going to echo that really, that there is, a great range of expertise. And one of the good things about the core courses that you do is that they're team taught. So you meet different members of staff as you go through the weeks, and that can help you to get a good sense, particularly earlier on, of the range of expertise and people that you might like to talk to as you go forward in your studies. As Emily and Anna have suggested, you might find that you get a real interest in something you didn't even know you were interested in until you come as well. It's great that we have the Centre for Gender History as well as some other really fantastic centres at Glasgow. So you can be part of a community and a range of communities that speak to each other in really interesting ways.
Yeah. So the next question on the list is, how does the course break down in terms of class time versus independent study? So in those 2 semesters of coursework, you take 3 courses, and each of those courses will typically have 2 contact hours per week, which is usually in the format of a seminar class. And, to prepare for that class, you'd usually be expected to do a certain amount of reading. You might be expected to do a pre-seminar task like posting on a discussion forum online. And then those courses are typically assessed by usually around 2 assessments, very often, though not necessarily, a presentation and an essay or some other form of written work. So that kind of gives you a sense of, you would meet with a group for 2 hours per week for 10 weeks. But there would be a certain amount of work that you'd have to do on your own in order to prepare to get the most out of that time. And that's often a really important thing about transitioning to postgraduate level study, right? Is the amount of kind of work that you need to do on your own in order to just to read really widely and to orient yourself in the subject matter that you're doing in your courses. And then when you sort of start to think about a dissertation topic, and then when you transition to writing the dissertation, that's really you-led and really about working independently, but you'll have 5 hours of supervision with your supervisor over the course of the dissertation writing period. So there is that regular check-in time as well, but it does involve a lot of independent work. And then Emily, I don't know if you want to say more about your experience in terms of kind of working independently and how that kind of sits against contact time?
I think because we've always had classes together, we always at least try and get together kind of once a week, once every 2 weeks, because we know that it is very independent, and it is good for us to all see each other and all speak to each other. So we do try and get out once a week, whether it's just we just have coffee. I think being on the course and doing, you do a module together every semester, so it's always a good opportunity for you to kind of get together and say, oh, should we just have a coffee, should we just do something after this? But I would say, I mean, I know for me and my undergrad, the contact time was about the same as it is now, so I would say that the jump isn't kind of that much. I was kind of about an hour and a half a week per module with 3 modules. So I suppose it's not something to be worried about. When it comes to your dissertation, it is very independent, but also there's enough to be getting on with it that you don't feel like you're kind of sat around like waiting for something to happen. And you'll have a supervisor. If you are ever really stuck, you just kind of reach out to them, and people are more than happy to help you. And, you get together with other people on the course, and you say, like, where are we at? What are we doing? You kind of organize it in a way that doesn't have to feel like you're doing it completely independently.
I'd say, yeah, in term time, my sort of undergrad experience was a bit strange in that we didn't have very much contact time at all. So I was quite used to working independently, and I liked having a little bit more contact time and a bit more kind of group conversation. So yeah, I liked it for that. But I'd certainly say in terms of like a work-life balance, it's very much manageable as you would like a full-time job. Like nobody's expecting you to work on the weekends or whatever, which is great. A minute dissertation as well. Like Anna said, it's very much you lead it yourself, but you do have a supervisor, and I think you can make an agreement with them, obviously depending on what they want to do, on whether you have more frequent short meetings or contact over email, or I like a few meetings that are very long because I like to talk. But you can kind of focus that however you want. And I think a great thing about our cohort is we have all, because we see each other so often, we are all very close. And like Anna said, we meet up a lot, and we have, every Thursday we do study day and things like that. And I'm sure that kind of the way the course is, we'll build it in to make it like that every year.
Yeah, I think that, you both mentioned, like, you remind me, right, that both of you, I know that both of you did your first degrees in England, and, if you're sort of experienced with the English and the Scottish university systems, right, I think the structure of this program might seem relatively intuitive, right, and not that different to what you might have been used to from your undergrad. This gets into perhaps to Sasha's question, which is, what if you're coming from a kind of different national academic context? And Sasha says that they're listening from France and would like to know if we have international students in gender history, and if we recommend gender history for international students. And yes, absolutely, we have lots of international students. And then there is sometimes that adjustment if you're coming from a university system that is structured a bit differently. Like, I know, because I did my first degree in the United States, that in US undergrad, it's very common to have a lot more contact time than what is common in the UK, right? And that's maybe where that adjustment might occur. To say, oh, I do need to work more independently in this degree, because more of the work that I'm doing is happening outside of formal class time, and maybe in, as Anna and Emily were pointing out, in collaboration with peers. But in this year's cohort, we have students from, we have many students from the UK. We also have many students from Europe, from the United States, from Asia, and it's different every year. So I would say, folks from anywhere are very, very welcome on the program. And, and this is like, a master's is a great way to have an international experience, right? Like, it's a really great kind of time-bounded way. I did I'm American. I did a master's in the UK, and that was the experience that I had to live in another country for a fixed period of time and sort of have this kind of experience of being young and going abroad. And a master's in my experience, was a great vehicle to do that. So I would recommend it to anyone. And then, yeah, we have another question about kind of the demographics of the program. So Elizabeth asks, how many students are enrolled in the gender history MSc master's programs? What percentage are online? So in this year's cohort, we have 20 students on the in-person program and just a few students on the online program. I think what's good about that is that it's, a group that's small enough to be cohesive, but large enough to be diverse. And I think that, those are sort of relatively sort of typical numbers. So everyone comes together in the core course and gets to know each other in that context in semester one. And then you all kind of go off and do your own things. But, as I think as Anna and Emily have been saying, there's lots of ways that the students in the cohort build community and get to know each other well. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question. Keep the questions coming. What should we say at this stage? We'll wait for more questions.
We might want to point out that we also have the things like the Houghton Postgraduate Group run through the Centre for Gender History, which is another way for students to be part of a community and to hang out together as well as to think together and to do different things. And that's very much a student-led thing. And so it can be a little bit different every year according to activities that people would like to see happening.
Yeah. So that's sort of the Houghton group. The Houghton group was started out of gender history postgraduate students, but now includes other students from postgraduate students from history. And that's the kind of like organized social and kind of para-academic activities of the history postgraduate students. And the chairs of Houghton are postgraduate research students, PhD students, partly because they're here a bit longer, they have that continuity. But all masters and PhD students in history are welcome to get involved in their events and help plan them. And so another advantage of that is that can be a way for master students to interact with PhD students and sort of build those bridges across the postgraduate cohort. I wonder if a thing that Anna said earlier that I wanted to follow up on was you talked about getting your hands dirty doing real history. I think you said something like that in terms of getting started on your dissertation archival research. And I wonder if you could say a bit more about that and like what your experience of that has been.
Yeah, so I think when you do history degrees, it can kind of feel a bit detached. It feels a lot of the time like you're doing a lot of reading, and so when you get to a dissertation and when you do kind of gender culture and text in your second semester, you really get a taste of like what it's like working with primary sources and the kind of variety of things that can be used as a primary source. And so then going online and like searching through these archives and finding like these rich, huge databases of things that you could use, you see kind of any project could be done out of all this stuff, there's so much here. And so then working out like where you get to go. So for me, I've spent a bit of time in Edinburgh at the National Library of Scotland and a lot of time in London in LSE's Hall Carpenter Archives, which are the LGBTQ plus archives. And so then you go in, you spend a day there or however long you need there. You just go through like rich archival material, which for me, it's been a lot of like sex education resource books or things like produced for teachers from like unions, which are like so interesting, newspapers, so many like things like that. And you just get a real taste of like doing something active rather than just, sitting at a desk, writing an essay. And when you do gender and culture and text, you like with Sarah's class, we go to the museum and we see some coins, you see some medals, we have classes about like dress and like clothing, and you kind of get a sense of the variety of things that can be a primary source. And history doesn't have to be about like books, and it doesn't have to be about even like written word. It can be about like whatever you want it to be, which I think is really good.
Emily, is there anything you want to add about your archival research experiences thus far?
I just think I'd say the Masters is fantastic for archival research. I think when you get that little bit of extra time as well, because I know undergrad, you kind of only have time to maybe, if you go to an archive, you go to maybe one. You don't do as much research, whereas I've been to 3. I've been to LSE, but to look at the Women's Library and the CND collections. I went to the Feminist Archive in Leeds, and also the Archive of Industrial Labour in Barrow-in-Furness, so very glamorous trips out. But it certainly has been fantastic, and I've found so much stuff through those archives that make you think, God, isn't this fantastic? Isn't this like why I'm here to do this, which is great. You definitely get more of a sense, I think, of what kind of further study would be like, and whether or not that would be for you equally. So I think you would find out very quickly if it was not for you, and that obviously is helpful.
I'm genuinely moved hearing you both like talk about how much you've enjoyed going to archives. That's like really touching, because that's what we do. That's at the heart of what we do. Sarah, do you want to say anything about the material culture stuff you do in your course? Because I think that kind of relates to this.
Yeah, just that the core courses and particularly gender culture text give you a real sense, I think, of the range of kinds of sources that we as working historians use, including lots of things that you may or may not have thought of before, like comics or medals or all kinds of things. And that we try to offer kind of not just theories about how to be a historian, but hands-on. This is what being a working historian involves from loads of different angles, really, and particularly in relation to this conversation about the use of sources and you know what we do when we get our hands dirty amongst different kinds of sources. And so that's quite exciting to get the chance to reflect on not only what does a historian do, but what kind of historian would I like to be. And so it's a nice opportunity, I think, to kind of investigate and reflect on what kind of historian you enjoy being. And it might be working with something that you really hadn't tried before, or it might be something that you knew you liked, and then you get further professional training in that. So we do have quite a lot of skills provision, you know, scaffolding the program, and you can take it in a lot of ways as much or as little additional support in skills building as you need, depending on your background and depending on your interests. And then you can go in all these different directions. And we are very lucky in Glasgow to have access not only online to lots of incredible collections that we have subscriptions to, or the ability to consult, but lots of great stuff, either nearby in Scotland or in the city itself, in the university itself. So we have the Hunterian collections, which are really, really rich and exciting to explore. So there's lots of ways that you can go with your research, and no particular kind of rules about how it has to be. You can be very flexible and find people to support the way that you want to work.
I think this line of conversation speaks to the question that Shibara asked in the chat about research opportunities. And I think, you know, what we're all saying here is that research opportunities are embedded in the structure of the program, right? You know, in the work that you'll do for your courses, right? Which you might, for the final essay for each of your optional courses, you might, and indeed your core courses, you might find that you're doing research and drawing on primary sources in that work. And then certainly for your dissertation, where you'll need to develop a topic of your own and a research agenda of your own. And Shibara had asked about whether that's the same for online and in-person students. Absolutely. You know, as Sarah said, there are things that are physical resources in Glasgow that, you know, you can avail yourself of. But Anna and Emily have both spoken to traveling to archives quite far afield from Glasgow, right? In London and elsewhere. And then also accessing online collections. More and more stuff is online. So a lot of, for example, a lot of what I do in my optional course makes use of online primary sources and databases. So everyone is kind of accessing the same things at the same time, and it doesn't matter where you are. But you can make use of the physical resources that are where you are. So indeed, one of our online students this year is doing a dissertation based on oral history interviews that she's collecting in the area where she lives, which is not Glasgow. So that's a sort of, you know, way that you can think about some of the advantages you might have as a student who's not based in Glasgow to pursue a research project that's relevant to the area where you are. And then also sort of, Shibara, I'm not sure if what you meant by research opportunity was kind of like beyond the formal structure of the program. You know, I think I would say with my kind of academic advisor hat on that I'd encourage you to focus on your work for your degree. But there's a student in this year's cohort who got a job working as a research assistant because a colleague had funding to employ a research assistant. So there's that kind of research experience sometimes available as well, that can be a kind of professional development for careers relating to history, both within and beyond the university. And that speaks to Nessa Rose's question about opportunities for on-campus part-time jobs. I think pretty much all of the students in this year's cohort have some kind of part-time job. I know of some students who work in on-campus roles in IT support, in the library, but then also a lot of students who have jobs outside the university. If you're on a student visa, you're allowed to do up to 20 hours of part-time work. I wouldn't necessarily suggest doing more than that, but I think that gives you a sense of the fact that, the reality is that most of our students are working alongside their studies and, adept at balancing that. I don't know, Anna and Emily, I don't know if you want to speak to your experience of that at all.
I mean, I can only speak to like my personal experience, but I don't think I've ever found having a problem balancing. I mean, I only work 12 hours a week, but and I'm very close by to the university, so I'd have to travel. I can go to the library and then go directly to work straight after, but it's not something that I've ever had any concerns with. I wouldn't want to work loads more than I do. But no, and there's plenty of opportunities in Glasgow. I know there's so many people on the course that have jobs, I think, and we've all found them kind of in our own ways. Glasgow, you can like register to their career service and they'll send you like weekly emails. So they'll send you emails about all the kind of on-campus and off-campus opportunities they have. So they will support you with getting a job. But I would say if it's not a completely difficult process.
I'd agree, yeah. I have just kind of done bits and bobs of online tutoring. Like I haven't had a consistent job. I really feel like I could have done if I wasn't kind of content with doing that. And also, sort of once you're in the flow of term time, I have a lot of responsibilities at home, but I don't live super far away. I can kind of dip for periods of time, and I'm able to balance kind of having home responsibilities with being a student fairly easily, which is something I was worried about because I'd struggled with it in the past, and it definitely, like, you can manage that with this program and everyone's really supportive. So
that's really helpful to hear. Yeah, and I think my general picture is that most people have other things going on in their lives other than this degree program, right? And I think that's something that we're all aware of. Whether it's carrying responsibilities or work or whatever it might be, that this is one aspect of your life and an important aspect of your life, but it's not that we're expecting kind of single-minded 100%, all emotions turned off dedication to this all the time, right? I see. I'm going to get to Elizabeth's question. So is there a huge difference in experience between studying online and studying in person? I think we have to acknowledge that they're necessarily different experiences, right? Like, the advantage of online is that it is flexible, and we try to put you in the room as much as we possibly can. And that's our kind of philosophy about how we see the online students integrating into the master's program, right? That we sort of make space for flexibility and asynchronicity, but we also prioritize giving you the opportunity to feel like you're in the physical room in Glasgow, right? So all of our teaching is hybrid. We've got a special hybrid room where it's sort of all set up with the screen and with the OWL camera so that you get a sort of 360-degree view, and it's sort of more easy than just sitting at a laptop to kind of see what's going on in the room. And we run all of our, kind of extracurricular seminars and skills workshops and other events hybrid. So our goal is to facilitate you being able to join on Zoom and kind of be there to the extent possible. Of course, it's not exactly the same as being in the room. And there, you can sort of engage in WhatsApp and email and whatever it might be to sort of talk to the folks who are here in Glasgow. It's not exactly the same as being able to go for coffee after class in person. But we do what we can to kind of make you feel like you're here and to make sure that academically you have access to the same opportunities that that the students who are studying in Glasgow do. And we're very committed to making sure that no one's missing out on any content or any skills or, you know, any kind of academic experience by virtue of not being here physically in person. But, you know, you might want to think about like kind of how to weigh, you know, that advantage of flexibility and being able to stay where you are if you want to stay where you are physically, you know, with the opportunity to like come here and experience what it's like to be here and take advantage of living in Glasgow and some of the both academic and non-academic kind of resources of the city. So there's a trade-off there, but we try to make the experiences as similar as it's realistically possible to make them. Sarah, do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, just to reiterate really that we are very mindful that everybody has a range of responsibilities in their lives and other things. And so, you know, we do try to build that flexibility in and that kind of support in for on-campus and online students. And that we've found in the past, you know, a great sense of community among the online students, not only, you know, as a cohort of online students, but also, you know, in communication and cooperation with on-campus colleagues as well. So, you know, we are finding that the two communities integrate and mix and have a sense of community, and that's something that's really important to us. And so, you know, anything that we think that the online students would be interested to attend, like our annual lecture in the Centre for Gender History and other wonderful events, we do try to make sure that they're always hybrid.
Yeah, I think Sarah and I both had the experience of being so excited when, after having taught the online students online for a year, they came to graduation this last year and we got to meet them in 3D. And it was so exciting to like see them in real life. You know, and I think that speaks to how much we'd gotten to know them at a distance over the course of the year that they were studying. Yeah, and I see that our colleagues in the who are running the Zoom are or the YouTube or whatever this is, are putting some links to our online short courses in the chat. And our MOOC, the Global History of Sex and Gender MOOC, is a really great way to get like a short little taster of the kind of work that we do here in the Center for Gender History. And I think that's particularly useful to have a look at if you're coming from a background outside history, or if you've been out of education for a long time. It could be like a really helpful way to dip your toes in gently and sort of see what it might be like to study here on a full degree program. This is sort of, maybe we're approaching the kind of last chance to get another question in the chat. If anyone has a burning question, now is the time. I wonder if we could sort of move, we'll give it a sec to see if there are any last burning questions, but I did want to ask Anna and Emily if there is anything that you wish you'd known before you started the program, and whether there's any advice you'd give to students who are just starting a next year's cohort.
I feel like my advice is like so generic, but it would just be to like try everything and to do everything that is offered. Like if they offer, say, there's a lecture happening next week, like go to it, you know, take up every opportunity, like make sure you enjoy all the spaces. Like not only does the university have like a really nice library, but there's so many other places that you can do work. And also like I think one of the things is you kind of move and you're thrown into studying pretty quickly depending on when you move. So I think just make sure, because you do have time and there will always be time, just make sure you like give yourself some time to see Glasgow and like experience Glasgow outside of your academic work, because I think that's one thing that I kind of regret not doing, and I'm trying to like shove it all into one. Like I mean I'll be here after I graduate, but yeah, I just feel like I've been here and I've not really done or seen much, and so I think that's one thing I wish I could do more of and should have done more of, because I did have the time.
I'd say I completely agree. Take absolutely every opportunity you get. Use the core courses and the option courses to do things you would never have done before, because it has really positive consequences, and I think it massively has changed the way I think for the better. And I would say, yeah, just enjoy it, but take your time with it, because it will be over before you know it.
That's maybe a good note on which to wrap up. I didn't see any last burning questions, so maybe we'll wrap up. Thank you all so much for listening in and for all of your great questions. You're very welcome to get in touch with me by email if you have more questions that sort of particularly about the kind of academic side of the program structure and what it's like to study here. So my email's on the program website, but it's sam.rutherford@glasgow.ac.uk. So you're very welcome to reach out if there's anything more that you'd like to talk about. And yeah, thanks so much for coming along.